Mob Entertainment just revealed their brand new multiplayer game, and this one looks very different to their previous title. Despite only being a short trailer, this one does give us quite a lot to talk about. We see some familiar locations, some returning characters, and even a possible tease at how this new game could relate to the main story. So this new game revealed at Gamescom is called Escape from Playtime, and the trailer gives us a good idea about the mechanics that we can expect. You and up to 3 friends will be playing as smiling critters as you try to, well, escape from playtime. It looks like you are going to be dropped into a level and tasked with finding the exit, solving puzzles and avoiding enemies along the way. Now it does look like there are going to be collectible items. We can see what looks like an energy pickup, and we can also see the player use a shoe to free another smiling critter, likely another player. So it looks like you're going to have to work together as a team to escape, but it's not going to be that easy. First of all, we see that at least one major Poppy Playtime character is returning. Barry! No, I'm kidding, it's the ever-creepy Miss Delight. She was one of the major antagonists of Chapter 3, and seeing her return here is interesting for a number of reasons. The last we saw of Miss Delight in the main game, we had left her crushed by a door. So for her to be here means that this new game is set before Chapter 3 in the timeline. We'll come back to that though, because I actually think we can explain this perfectly. And yes, just to point this out, this is the same Miss Delight we met in the main game. She's here with Barb, her makeshift weapon, and something that she grew an attachment to. But it's also very ironic that the major enemy they chose to show off here was Miss Delight. Nized, another member of the Partner in Crime program, was a big fan and advocate for Mob's previous multiplayer game, Project Playtime. I know for a fact he was pretty devastated to hear when that game was finally cancelled, but Miss Delight was his favourite character from Chapter 3. So either this is the biggest coincidence of the year, or this is secretly an apology to him. But it's not just Miss Delight that players will have to contend with. We do see Bunzo will have the ability to stun and kidnap players, and there will also be exploding boogie bots. But this new game, being at least partly set in the school within Playcare, brings up a very important point. This new game looks much darker in tone compared to Project Playtime. This was actually one of my biggest complaints about that game. As fun as it was, Project didn't really capture the horror that I was looking for. This game looks to be much more inspired by Chapter 3, which is considered by many to be the best chapter of the main game. One of the reasons it's so highly regarded is the atmosphere. Chapter 3 was definitely one of the scariest in my opinion, and it seems like this new game is taking elements from that chapter, such as the overall darkness and Miss Delight's Weeping Angel mechanic. But this also makes me wonder how much of this new game is going to be spent in the Playcare. Considering the game is called Escape from Playtime, we can assume that the smiling critters here are trying to escape the factory. For them to do that, they would need to travel upwards. This would essentially be the opposite of the player's journey in the main game. Considering we see the critters use an elevator, I'm going to guess that we are going to be traveling across different floors as different levels. This could mean that we see other fan-favorite characters return in later levels. Huggy final boss confirmed? Now one big question I have is what kind of game is this actually going to be? A lot of games similar to this use procedural generation to make repeated playthroughs different. Every time you fail, you go back and the map has changed. But looking at how involved these puzzles are, I'm not so sure this game's going to do that. We still don't know what the relevance of Barry is either. I know some people theorized that this game was going to be like Repo, where you're going to have to fill Barry with different toys to progress, but it doesn't seem like Barry is going to be that involved in the game. It seems like he's only going to be involved in certain puzzles, but we'll have to wait and see. Now one final thing I want to say about the gameplay, it seems like there are going to be some shenanigans. The trailer tells us that not only will we have to watch out for threats from the enemies, but also our friends. Now I'm not sure if this means there will be opportunities to betray each other or if there are going to be imposters. Considering we'll be playing as the smiling critters, it's entirely possible that there will be other smiling critters around the game that might be less than friendly. A lot of games recently have been using your microphone against you, playing recordings of your voice to trick other players, so I'm interested to see what Mob do with this concept. Also, there does seem to be catnaps gas around this place, which makes sense, and we all know how that affected the main character, so there's even a chance we could get some hallucination mechanics too. Now, I did promise to explain how this game could tie into the main story. I already explained how this game has to take place before the player arrives at the factory, but I think we might have an even deeper connection. This game is presumably about a group of toys trying to escape the factory. Chapter 5 of Poppy Playtime might have even given us a big clue to this. Back in Chapter 5, we were given some pretty big hints that some toys did in fact escape the factory. We learn of a group led by someone known as Gentle John. John led a group of toys known as the Joyless. These toys refused to participate in the Hour of Joy, hence the name, and after the massacre, they attempted to leave the factory. They were supposedly later found by the prototype, and all that remained were their burnt corpses. Although even back then, I talked about how this seems oddly convenient. The one group that openly opposed the prototype and attempted to leave all ended up dying in such a way that just so happened to make them unrecognizable. I made a theory that these corpses were random toys that the prototype burnt to keep the other toys in line, partly as a warning to anyone else that would try to escape, but also as a way to maintain control by showing that there is no other option but to follow him. If the other toys learned that Gentle John and the Joyless managed to escape the factory and survive, then they might take that same chance, and the prototype's dream for a better place would be in ruin. Now it's possible in this new game we are playing as some of those Joyless. There were supposedly 22 of them, and some of those were smiling critters. So there is a chance that we will learn more about Gentle John and the Joyless in this game. This actually ties into a huge theory that I never made about Chapter 5. We had some massive hints that this game series is going to expand in a big way. We learned that Eddie Ritterman was conveniently on a business trip during the Hour of Joy. My money is him being the big bad of this series. We also learned that there were indeed other facilities aside from Playtime Co., and Eddie had been funneling resources into them before the factory fell. Now that there is a chance that some toys made it out of Playtime Co., well, all of this is just really setting up the idea that Playtime Co., the company, is still very much active, now being run by Eddie, who has no real competition anymore. All seems like this Hour of Joy thing was very convenient for him. This would explain why the factory hasn't been investigated or seized by the authorities after 10 years of being supposedly abandoned, and it could tie into why we, the player, came back here in the first place. Like this video if you want me to finally make that theory. Now this could just be a silly little game, perhaps there are no lore implications at all, but that really isn't Mob's style. We got lore in Project Playtime, and Mob love to put their world building anywhere they can, so I think there's a good bet that this game will have at least something relevant to the story. And you know I'll be there to try and figure that one out. So what do you think? Are you excited for this one? I personally think that this game has a much smaller scope than Project Playtime, and honestly I think that's a good thing. Mob's last multiplayer game was certainly ambitious, in my opinion too ambitious, and I already covered that in my previous video. But I would love to see some smaller games like this, as long as they contain lore and as long as they are done well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.